So, the Shroud takes place in the near future, where a genetic research team from the NIH has been asked by the Vatican to use the latest findings of the Human Genome Project to shed new light on the authenticity of the Shroud of Turin. The lead researcher in the story, Dr. Robert Strickland, is an agnostic with spiritual leanings, but as the inquiry proceeds, it appears that this is indeed the burial cloth of the historical Jesus, and the vestments bloodstains then open up the possibility of cloning, so you can imagine where all that might lead. The investigative journey of the story from Washington, D.C. to Israel to Belize has global repercussions and transforms the lives of everyone involved. So Mike's going to start out with the book's intro. Mike?
Can you hand me the mic?
Yeah. Frere Jean was the first to wake. Smelling the smoke, the aged monk sat upright in bed, his hand instinctively clasping the iron key and the gold medallion on a chain around his neck. He threw on his robe and deftly moved toward a thick hemp rope hanging from the tower. After hauling on it once, twice, the heavy bronze bell began to toll. 3 other monks burst into the chamber, eyes wide, with rough woolen blankets draped across their shoulders. Without a word, all four hurried to a stone and wood chamber, already half engulfed in flames. At the room's center, still untouched by the blaze, stood an ornate silver chest on a low stone pedestal. Using their blankets, the other monks beat back the flames enough that Frere Jean could insert the key and open the chest. He lifted out the contents, an old stained bolt of linen, already singed from the heat. Tucking it beneath his robe, he hobbled out of the burning room toward the monastery's rear entrance, where the horses were stabled. From the village came the thunder of hoofbeats and cries of alarm. As the other 3 monks stood around him, illuminated in the moonlight, Jean removed the gold medallion from around his neck. It bore the embossed image of a many-limbed oak tree. He looked into each man's eyes. Then, approaching the youngest, he placed the medallion's chain over his head and took a bolt of cloth from beneath the robe and tucked it into the leather pouch with a shoulder strap. All eyes were on the strong young monk as he slung the pouch over his shoulder and covered it with his tunic. "You are being entrusted with what will one day be recognized as the church's most valuable material possession," the old man rasped, still laboring to catch his breath. "It is the most sacred earthly connection to the spirit of Jesus Christ. Deliver it to the abbot of Chambéry. The gold oak will confirm your mission. God be with you. Now, go." The young monk jumped on the back of a waiting horse and galloped into the night, just as the invading horde rounded the corner leading to the front of the monastery. The horsemen swarmed inside, throwing silver goblets, figurines, and other artifacts onto the blankets and howling into the darkness. As the 3 remaining monks tried to save the monastery, a phalanx of horsemen struck them down with mace and sword. Frere Jean was felled by a single blow from a chain-nailed fist. The camera pulled back to reveal a scene of flaming destruction. Suddenly, the image froze, a ghostly abbey engulfed in flames. Looking exhausted, Dr. Robert Strickland stopped the DVD player, rubbed his eyes, and glanced at the clock on a nearby desk. It was 1:42 a.m. Strickland gathered up the stack of papers strewn across the couch beside him. On the top page was printed on fine parchment the gold-crossed keys of St. Peter, the symbol of the papacy. After slipping the pages into an unmarked manila folder and locking it in a filing cabinet, Strickland pressed the DVD's eject button and returned the disc to its case. Dropping it into a desk drawer, he turned out the light and headed upstairs to bed.
So this next section takes us further into the story. Sarah Bender is an investigative reporter for the New York Times and soon finds herself at the center of the Shroud investigation. The protests continued. Meanwhile, for nearly a week, both the NIH and the Vatican were the scenes of in-house battles over how to proceed. Finally, they each issued press releases reiterating that the Vatican was now in full possession of all materials related to the Shroud of Turin, intimating that any cause for controversy was now past. But both camps left the question of actual genetic analysis or manipulation glaringly unaddressed. Sarah Bender watched the evening news over dinner as they profiled an odd new group calling itself Neoteric. The Neoterics had mobilized a candlelight vigil numbering in the thousands. The group's followers wore hooded iridescent robes of a holographic mylar material, giving them a monk-like aura but with a futuristic patina. Gathered in San Francisco's Golden Gate Park, they held bioluminescent candlesticks, chanting in Gregorian tones. The light from their wands rose into the night, casting the assembled faces in an unearthly glow. Rather than protesting what had allegedly occurred at the NIH, the Neoterics saw recent events as welcome harbingers of a new era. They disagreed, a spokesperson said, not with the basic precepts and beliefs of the world's religions, but with the modern-day implementation of those belief systems. While there seemed to be no central organization or hierarchy of leadership in Neoteric, they did provide a brief charter statement. In a nutshell, the group painted most traditional religious institutions as having strayed far from the basic teachings of their spiritual founders. Neoteric, by contrast, favored the open source paradigm of the software world. In their statement, they advocated a, quote, non-acquisitive, inclusive, and decentralized spirituality without rigid authoritarian hierarchies or controlling and moralistic dogma. As the TV camera panned across the assembled throng, Bender saw a montage of signs held aloft. One depicted a homeless person who looked like conventional images of Jesus being ordered away from the steps of a megachurch by a coiffed and tailored televangelist. Another pictured a priest, a rabbi, and an imam feasting together in the back of a convertible super-stretch limo. But the best one, she thought, read, Neoteric, the human race, version 2.0, and Neoteric equals transcendence and compassion. What more do we need? The assemblage seemed to be a loose confederation of cyber 20-somethings and New Age enthusiasts. The obvious intent of the network television coverage was to present the group as a band of kooks. But Sarah saw it differently. Having flirted with the speed metal and trance music scenes during her teens, she often found herself in sympathy with the primal energy of such movements. Thank goodness for the young and the young at heart, she thought. Without a youthful sense of righteous indignation, coupled with a healthy dose of naivete, who would ever lead the charge for any real change? The news story finally ended, and she gazed out the window at the winter landscape below. A dead leaf fell from a tree and landed on the windowsill outside her living room. Desiccated and brown, it was soon dusted in a delicate layer of new snow. She sat watching as more snow slowly enveloped the leaf in a soft white cocoon.
And this section takes us even further into the story. Checking back at the triage area, Strickland and Bender learned that the injured woman had used her cell phone to call her family on the Belize mainland. A local television channel had just aired a news item concerning the attack. "Let's go," Strickland said. "We don't have much time." At the dock, they found Tellison's boats riddled with large caliber bullet holes. Several of the vessels had been burned to the waterline when their gas tanks ignited. "This explains the explosions we heard," Strickland said as they surveyed the destruction. Along the wharf, they found the bodies of several security guards. Strickland turned them over, checking for survivors, but all were dead from gunshot wounds to the back or the head. The safeties on their weapons were still set, meaning they had been taken utterly by surprise. Bender surveyed the scene in numb silence. They found the melted wreckage of an inflatable boat at the scene, still tied to the dock. Rigid inflatable, Strickland said, typically used by drug runners, nearly invisible to radar. That explains why Tellison's people didn't see these guys coming. They've even got an auxiliary battery-powered motor for silent approach. The explosions must have disabled this one, so they all escaped in one inflatable. Bender closed her eyes against the bodies and the charred wreckage. "We have to get to the mainland somehow," Strickland said. "These people are professionals. It won't be long before the Belize City police arrive. At this point, I'm not sure who we can trust." In the distance, they heard the sound of a fast-approaching boat. "Get down," Strickland hissed. They ducked down behind a storage shed and peered around the wall as the boat slowed and moved parallel to the shore. An intense spotlight swept over the docks and paused on the still smoldering ruins of several boats, then again on the lifeless bodies of the guards. "Could be the police," Strickland whispered. "Or maybe a mop-up crew, checking for survivors and wanting to finish the job. Either way, we need to keep still." Bender nodded. She peered again around the corner of the shed. The pilot of the boat seemed to be plotting his next move. She spotted the faint glow of a cigar at the helm. After a long pause, a voice hesitantly called out from the boat, "Senor, senorita." The voice was hoarse and strained, but Bender recognized it instantly. She stood up. "What are you doing?" Strickland whispered, trying to pull her back down. Pushing his hand away, Bender walked forward into the light.
So thanks again to Ransom and Susan, and thanks for coming. Check out our webpage. It's theshroud.net. And
Wait a second, and we promised Susan that we'd finish with an air guitar. So.
All right, you ready?
Okay, go.
Dun, 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 dun. Good night. Thanks again.
Stephen and Michael Meloan, the Shroud, which is available here tonight for the special Aqus Speakeasy price of 12 bones.